Okay. All right. Sorry, I have to talk to myself. No, don't talk to me. Okay. So we are going to move into section 2.4. We talked about equations of lines yesterday. So I hope you remember. I know you may or may not have looked at the homework yet because we had the test yesterday. Hopefully you started looking at it. So I'm going to get you guys to fill in some blanks here for me and help me out. So be prepared. I might, harass you a little bit, make you answer some questions for me. But we're going to take what we did on 2 days ago, that would have been Wednesday, and writing the equations and lines, and we're going to extend that to include parallel and perpendicular lines. So just to remind you of what parallel and perpendicular lines look like and how they relate to algebra and what we've been talking about in terms of slopes, here are your definitions of parallel and perpendicular. Wordy definitions: parallel to non-distinct or two distinct non-vertical lines have the same slope, then the lines are parallel. What you need to get from that is that parallel lines have the same slope. Two lines that have the same slope are parallel lines. Parallel lines are those that run along like the sides of railroad tracks. So they run along next to each other and they don't ever intersect. Okay, that's actually very important a little bit later on. Right now, in terms of just the definition, I just need you to know that they run along next to each other. Well, if they run along next to each other and never intersect, then that means that the rise and the run must be the same, okay? Those ratios will turn out to be exactly the same. And that's what happens. And I loved this visual, and I just thought I needed to share it with you guys because I just thought it really kind of helps us to solidify that concept of parallel lines. So if two lines have the same slope, then they are parallel. If two lines are parallel, then they have the same slope. Okay, that's kind of cool. So perpendicular lines, what you probably remember about perpendicular lines from your high school geometry class is that they form right angles. Okay, so that's typically the kind of geometry definition of perpendicular lines. It's two lines which intersect and form right angles. Well, the algebra definition is two lines whose slopes have a product of -1. The other way that you probably learned it was that the slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. Okay, so what that means is that I'm going to scroll this down just a little bit. So if the slope of one line is a over b, then the slope of the other line is -b over a. Now, I really like to emphasize the fact that they're opposite signs, because if you have a line which has a positive slope and you have another line which is perpendicular to it, that line must go down. It must have a negative slope, okay? And so that's to help you remember that one's positive and one's negative, and they do have to be reciprocals of each other, or they intersect, but they just don't form those right angles, okay? So the big thing is, and once again, you can either look at it by saying, if I took a over b times negative b over a, multiplied those together, I would have negative ab over ab, which would simplify to -1. And so that's why we say the product of their slopes is -1. If you simply want to remember that the slopes are negative reciprocals, that's amazing also. But I do need you to know that algebra relationship between parallel lines and two lines which are perpendicular. So parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines, their slopes are negative reciprocals, or the product of their slopes is -1. So big kind of deals there. Okay? All right. Questions? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about two lines and determining whether those lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So for problem number 1, we have -4x minus 2y is equal to -9, and we have 5x minus 10y is equal to 7. Okay. What do we need to compare? And somebody's going to have to answer me this either in the chat or out loud. What do I need to compare in order to determine whether or not these two lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither? What do I need to be able to compare? What was I talking about on the previous page?
Slope.
The slopes, okay? So because I'm given these two lines in Standard form, what form do I need to put them in order to compare their slopes? Somebody help me out. There was a form we talked about on Wednesday.
Y equals mx plus b.
Yep, you got it. So putting the equations in what we called slope-intercept form, or we called it y is equal to mx plus b, because then our slope is sitting there waiting for us to select it, okay? Oh goodness, there's sirens outside my window. Okay, so I need to solve each of these equations for y. That's the short form, okay? So to compare the slopes, I need to solve the equations for y, all right? So I want you to solve these two equations for y. I want you to come up with the slopes, and then we'll do this together. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to come up with the slopes. You can send them to me in a private message. Don't send it to everybody if you want to check your slopes. Or you can just wait for a minute. But I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to find the slopes of these two lines, to solve these two equations for y. Right, sorry. Starting to get answers. That's making me happy. Some of you getting a little stuck, so I'm going to kind of help you out just a little bit. You just started, if you're stuck. Remember that your slope is going to be the coefficient of x Getting there. Couple more folks need to let me know what they think the slopes are. If you're wrong, it's okay. That's the whole point in doing this. I promise not to scream or yell or do anything if you get wrong. I'm running out of Jeopardy music in my head, so y'all gotta help me out. Yeah, you're there. Okay, that's good to know. Okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I need to know what we don't get. So I don't like struggling students, but I like struggling students because that means you're trying something. Okay. All right. So I've got a couple of answers. So let's look at this together. So I've tortured you long enough to sit there and stare at your screen. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add my 4x to both sides, right? And so now to get y by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by -2. Now, really and truly, the only thing I care about is the slope, but we'll divide the whole thing by -2. And so this is going to give me a positive y. 4 divided by -2 is -2 times x. And then a negative divided by negative is a positive 9/2. Like I said, the 9/2 is really not my concern. My concern is this number attached to the x. And there is my slope. So my slope is -2. Okay? So if I do this one for y'all, let's see if you can do the second part. A couple of you have already done that, I know. So on the second equation, I subtracted 5x from both sides, so I have this nice -5x plus 7. And now see what happens when you solve for y. Continuing that. Okay, so at this point, we're going to divide both sides by the -10, right? Dividing each thing by -10. And this is going to give us positive y. This one I'm actually going to write out as -5 over -10 because I want you to see what's happening, and then -7/10. Here, though, I can simplify this. Not only can I simplify the 5/10, but the two negatives become a positive. And so this is going to become positive 1/2 x minus 7/10. And that positive 1/2 is that number that I'm looking for because that's that coefficient of x, and therefore that is going to be my slope. So the slope of this first line is -2, and the slope of the second line is 1/2. Based on what we talked about on the previous problem, or on the previous slide, is this pair of lines parallel to each other, perpendicular to each other, or neither? So in other words, they're just two nice equations. So somebody help me out here, parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And I would say you could just put a P, but P stands for parallel or perpendicular. So you can either put it in the chat, you can put it to everybody, or you can see this is what happens.
Is it perpendicular?
They are perpendicular. They are perpendicular. So, okay. Yeah, sometimes my chat does not update. So I'm just realizing that I've got answers over here. And, so, I'm so sorry. Okay. So, yes, 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 and yes, and yes, and yes. Y'all are doing amazing. I don't know why my chat doesn't update. Okay. So, it's okay. All right. So, we're good. So, we've got -2 and +1/2. And that means that these two lines are perpendicular to each other. Right? Yay! Okay. All right. So this next pair, again, we want to know is the equation y is equal to -2 and 3y is equal to 12. Are they parallel? Are they perpendicular? Or are they neither? Okay. So again, I need to be able to compare the slopes. In order to compare the slopes, I need to put the equations in slope-intercept form. Well, this first one is in slope-intercept form. It's solved for y. What is the slope of this line? Well, there is no slope, right? Exactly. It is 0, okay? This is, anybody remember what kind of equation this is when I graph this? It's either horizontal or vertical, I'll tell you that. Anybody remember which one it is? If I have y equals, yep, it's horizontal, okay? It is my horizontal line, okay? Y equals to a constant is my horizontal line. So the second one over here, when I solve it for y, I'm actually just going to divide both sides by 3. Again, I get y is equal to a constant, which means that my slope is 0. This, again, is my horizontal line, okay? Two horizontal lines are parallel. And also because I can see that they have the same slope, then that's the other kind of thing. But two lines which are horizontal means they go like this, and that means they would be parallel. What kind of relationship would a horizontal and a vertical line have? Horizontal and vertical. What kind of relationship would those two lines have?
Perpendicular.
Perpendicular, perfect. Okay. Those are hard to compare slope-wise because one of them is 0 and the other one is undefined. But if just know going forward, if you have a horizontal line and a vertical line, that relationship is always going to be perpendicular, right? All right. So let us take this a step further. So I don't have a whole bunch of questions or problems to work today. So we are going to finish early. I'm just telling you that. So, but I do want to spend a little bit of extra time on each of these because there are so many parts to these problems. So when you're doing your homework on these, some of these are going to simply say, here's the information, write my final answer. Some of them are going to be that step by step, and it's going to say, stop here, stop here, stop here. And I'm going to try to show you those stops along the way, okay? So it says to use the conditions to write an equation for each line. First of all, we're going to write it in point-slope form, and so I'm going to remind you of the point-slope form. That is y minus the y1 is equal to the slope times x minus the x1. That's our point-slope form. Then it says, then we want to write it in slope-intercept form, and that is the y is equal to mx plus b form. And then finally, we're going to write it in standard form, which is our ax plus by is equal to c, okay? And so those are the three pieces of this final answer. So anytime we want to write the equation of a line, we need two things. We need a point and we need a slope. The problem is here, we're given a point, but we're not outright given the slope. The slope is given to us, but it's kind of hidden. So it's given to us in the fact that we are told that the line passes through the point -2, 3. There's my point. And the line is parallel to the line whose equation is given to us here. So that means that I need to take this information, that it's parallel to this line, to find the slope. So the first thing I have to do is to find the slope of this line. So before I can do anything else, I need to find the slope of this line. So of y is equal to 1/4 x minus 2. And the slope is actually given to us right here. Can anybody tell me what the slope of this line is? This line that I'm looking at. Either in the chat or out loud.
1/4 x.
Okay, yep, it is. It is just the 1/4. You don't have to worry about the x. We just want the number part there, but it does come from the 1/4 x. That's what I'm looking at to determine the slope, is that 1/4 x. Okay, so my slope is 1/4. So now, in order to write this first part, I want to use the point -2, 3, and I want to use the slope of 1/4. Because the lines are parallel, I have to use the same slope, okay? If it's a perpendicular, then I would have to do something else to that slope. So we're going to start with this first part. We're going to start by just writing our formula, because I think the more times you can write that formula, the more likely you are to remember that. So y minus y1 is equal to the slope times x minus x1. And yes, you are going to have to know this formula, okay? So I have y minus my y value is equal to the slope times x minus the x value. Now I'm going to tell you right now, I told you this the other day, I write minus that negative, but when you type this into my labs for your final answer on this part, you're going to want to turn that into x plus 2. So this is the answer for the first part of those step-by-step problems. So when it says write the equation of the line in point slope form, this is what it's talking about, okay? So this is point slope form, okay? So this is the point slope form right here, just like this. And this is what you would type into your answer, all right? So far, so good? All right. So part B, it says we want to take this equation and put it into slope-intercept form. Okay, so I'm going to start with y minus 3 is equal to 1/4 times x plus 2. Now, I could simply distribute that 1/4 through here, but you guys are not going to like the result because I'm going to have a fraction. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of the fraction here, okay? And I'm going to get rid of the fraction by multiplying everything through by this common denominator of 4, all right? And so that's going to result in 4y minus 12 is equal to, well, 4 times 1/4 is going to be 1 times x plus 2. And so cleaning this up just a little bit, I have just that 4y minus 12 is equal to x plus 2. Well, slope-intercept form means I'm solving this equation for y. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 12 to both sides. And so that's going to give me 4y is equal to x and then plus 14 because I added 12 to everything. To continue solving this for y and to get it into slope-intercept form, I have to divide each piece by 4. And I'm literally going to write 4 under each piece, and then we'll simplify this. Most of the time, we prefer to write this as 1/4 x, and then 14 over 4 simplifies to 7/2. And this is the answer to part B. This is my slope-intercept form. Okay. Right? Questions? All right. The last part is to put it into standard form. Now, the big difference in standard form is I can't have fractions in my answer. So these nasty little fractions here got to go away, okay? I'm going to show you the easy way to make them go away, okay? I'm all about the easy way. And then we're going to talk about one other thing having to do with standard form. So bear with me on that one. So the first thing I have to do is I have to get rid of the fractions. So I'm going to show you the short way. I could start right here with the slope-intercept form, but that's the long way. I'm going to go back through part B here until I see something where I got rid of the fractions. And it can either be this part, or this part. I typically go to the place right before I divided everything to get y by itself. So I'm going to take this part right here, And that's what I'm going to start with because you've already done the hard work. You got rid of the fractions, right? So now, in order to get this, I have to have x's, y's equal to c. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. That gives me negative x plus 4y is equal to 14. Now, here's kind of a disclaimer, and I'm just going to apologize straight up. In the real world, we don't care whether that x is positive or negative. So you will have some answers that are standard form that are going to have that first term as negative. However, okay, on the homework, and that's going to be like the quiz questions, on the homework, if you were to type this answer in, it's going to say right answer, wrong format. And so what you want to do is you want to take this and multiply everything by -1, effectively changing the signs. So I would change the sign on the x, change the sign on the y, and change the sign on the constant, okay? So please be very careful there and make sure that you realize, so you should either have negative, positive on this one, or everything should have a different sign. Both of these are actually in standard form. They're both very nice equations of lines, but on the homework, MyLabs really wants that first coefficient to be positive, okay? Sometimes the quiz questions have a negative, sometimes they have a positive. So I would look at this and I would check this on the quiz first. If this is not negative and you have a negative, then make sure you change the signs on everything. Okay. Questions? Okay. So 3 parts again. Use the conditions to write the equation for the line, point-slope form, slope-intercept form, standard form. Passing through the point, -2, 3, this should be familiar. But now the line is perpendicular to this equation. So before I do anything else, again, I've got a point, I need the slope. So that means that I need to find the slope of this line. The slope of this line, again, is 1/4. The same equation from the previous one. But is that the slope that I want to use for this problem? So I'm going to use the point -2, 3. And I need you to tell me what the slope of the line I want to write the equation for is. The slope of this line is 1/4, and I want to write the perpendicular one. What is going to be the slope I'm going to use? It is going to be -4, exactly. Okay, excellent. So I flip it, and I change the sign, okay? So I flip it over, I flip 1/4 over to make it 4 over 1, okay? And I make it at the opposite sign. Excellent. Okay. So now I'm going to go through, again, this is the y minus the y value is equal to the slope times x minus the x value. Just reminding you of the formula, so I have y minus 3 is equal to -4 times x minus the -2. Simplifying that just a little bit, so I have y minus 3 is equal to -4 times x plus 2. And this is the point slope form. Okay, so this is my answer for part A. Notice I haven't distributed that 4 through there. I don't want to. The point slope form literally is going to look just like this. Y plus or minus a number is equal to the slope times x plus or minus a number. Okay? All right, so that's the first part. Second part is now we want to write it in slope-intercept form. So we're going to start with y minus 3 is equal to -4 times x plus 2. I just like to write what I'm starting with. I'm going to solve for y, so y minus 3 is equal to -4x minus 8, distributing my -4 through there now. Adding 3 to both sides, I get y is equal to -4x minus 5, because I added that 3 in there. And now, lo and behold, this is slope-intercept form. Because I don't have any fractions in this, I can go straight into my standard form, starting with my slope-intercept form and adding 4x to both sides. Remember when I move it across the equal sign, that effectively changes the sign. And this is standard form. Oh, that was so much nicer. Love that integer slope. Questions? All right. Somebody want to talk to me? Oh, if you raise your hand, I really don't see it, so I just realized that. So, I think that was from before. So. Okay, just making sure nobody has questions. All right, so next one. Find the equation of the line that is parallel to x is equal to 7 and goes through the point 11, negative 3. I only want to put the answer in standard form. Tell me what is special about the equation x is equal to 7. Somebody tell me what's special, because it is a very special equation. X equals to 7. What is special about this one?
It's vertical.
It is a vertical line, okay? So this equation, the graph of this is a vertical line. And that means that the slope is undefined, okay? So this is really important. So if I want another line that is parallel to this one, okay, then that means that that other line must also be a vertical line. Does that make sense? So if I have a line which is vertical, goes up and down straight like this, in order to be parallel to it, that other line has to be vertical, okay? So to have a line parallel to a vertical line, new line must also be a vertical line. Okay. So since it's a vertical line, the slope is undefined. That makes it a little bit hard to write it using that point slope form. We just want to write our answer in standard form, which this is standard form, okay? So my new equation is going to be x equals 2, and it's got to pass through this point. Any thoughts, and I promise I will not yell if you get it wrong, any thoughts as to what the x value is for my equation if it has to go through this point 11, negative 3?
$11.
That's it. It's 11. Why did you say 11? Nothing like putting you on the spot.
It's the only number there is. That's x.
That's it. That's exactly it. That is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted you to say, okay? It has to go through that point. That's the only point you have, and it has to be the x value. Easy enough? Excellent. Very good. Don't make that one hard. It should be super nice. Okay? All right. So now we want to find the equation of the line which is perpendicular to this x equals to 7 and passing through this point. Okay, so we've already established that x is equal to 7 is a vertical line, right? We got that part. It is a vertical line. What kind of line is perpendicular to a vertical line? I said this earlier. You can either type it in or you can tell me what line. What kind of line is perpendicular to a vertical line?
Horizontal line.
Exactly. So a horizontal line is perpendicular to a vertical line. And so now I'm going to put you on the spot again. What kind of equation is the horizontal line? Vertical line was the x equals 2. What kind of equation is the horizontal line?
The y is equal to y equal to
It's going to be the y equals 2. And what value is y going to be equal to for this problem?
-3.
Exactly. That's it. That's all there is to that problem. Would that they all be so nice and friendly? Okay. Questions? Okay. One other thing I want to point out to you about the vertical and the horizontal lines. So your horizontal line is going to cross. So if here is this is terrible picture, but anyway, here's my x-axis and my y-axis. Your horizontal line crosses your y-axis, correct? So that's why it's the y equals 2 equation. Your vertical line crosses the x-axis, and that's why it's the x equals 2 equation. So maybe x is equal to -5, and we could call maybe this one y is equal to, I don't know, 6 or something weird like that, okay? But maybe that will also help you remember those rather than just memorizing these things. So my y equals 2 is going to cross that. It's horizontal, so it crosses that y-axis. Horizontal line crosses the y, however you want to remember that. And then your vertical line crosses the x-axis, and it's the x equals 2 equation, okay? All right. Okay, so only got the fun ones left. Okay, so this one we're going to have to do a little bit more work for, but you got this. I got confidence in you, okay? We want to find the equation of the line which is parallel to the line we're given. Here's the line we're given, and passes through the point -2, -5. And all the directions for this one say is express your answer in slope-intercept form. I am going to tell you that this really means let's put it in point-slope form and then solve it for y, okay? So what I want to do, but we just don't have to do the stops along the way. We just get to the y is equal to mx plus b form. Okay, so that's going to be the final answer is going to look like this. So I'm going to kind of make a list over here of what all we need to do in order to accomplish this. I think sometimes that's helpful. The first thing we need to do is we need to find the slope. Okay, so we need to find the slope so that we've got a point and a slope. So we've got a point, we need a slope, okay? The second thing we need to do is we need to use the y minus the y value is equal to the slope times x minus the x value, okay? And then finally, we're going to take that and we're going to solve it for y so that we get y is equal to mx plus b. Okay, so kind of a step-by-step process here, right? So we'll start with step 1. So the first step is to figure out what the slope is. So in order to figure out what the slope is, we're going to start with 3x minus 5y is equal to 1. This was what we did on the very first problem, okay? We tried to figure out what the slope was, and we did that by solving this equation for y. So the first problem's, I think it was problems 4 and 5 on this, where we were asked to write the equation, and when it went through all those steps, it was solved for y. It was y is equal to, and we just pulled out that slope. Here we've got to do a little bit more work. So I'm going to walk you through this process again. So we're going to subtract 3x from both sides, all right? And then we're going to divide both sides by -5, and that's going to give me a positive 3/5 x, and then minus a 1/5. So my slope is 3/5. That's the first thing, done, okay? So does anybody have a question as to how I got the slope? Okay, so now we're going to use the slope of 3/5, and the point we're given, which is -2, -5, you'll have to be given the point, okay? And we're going to go y minus the y value, so y minus -5 is equal to the slope times x minus the -2. Now, I am going to clean this up because it makes it easier to work with. So 3/5 times x plus 2, okay? And now I'm going to finish this out. In order to solve for y, I'm going to get rid of this fraction, okay? So to do this, so to continue working through this so I can solve for y, I'm going to take this and I'm going to multiply through by my denominator of 5. So I'm going to multiply 5 times y plus 5 equals 3/5 times x plus 2. So I'm multiplying this whole thing by 5. I get 5y plus 25 is equal to 3 times x plus 2, right? The only foolish question is the one that you don't know the answer to, that you don't ask. So if you are thinking, what the heck is she doing? You can send me a private message that says, what the heck are you doing? I'll be okay with that. So, all right. So, or you can ask me. So now I'm going to subtract 25 from both sides. That's going to give me 5y is equal to 3x minus 19. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 5. And I get y is equal to 3/5 x minus 19/5. And that is my final answer. So write it up here so we can see it. 3/5 x minus 19/5. And that is my final answer. Notice the slope of this line is 3/5, which was the slope of the line that was parallel to it. I'm going to take a breath and see if you have questions. Okay. I would say last call, but you know I'll go back and answer questions on this stuff, so hopefully not last call. Okay. Next problem. And this is actually the last problem, so not really last call, but it's the last problem. So find the equation of the line which is now perpendicular to the line 3x minus 5y is equal to 1 and passes through the point 1, -4. And we want our final answer to be in that slope-intercept form. So again, we want our final answer to be y is equal to mx plus b. But same thing we did a while ago, I'm going to make a list of the steps we have to go through. So if this is the instructions you see, the first thing we have to do is we have to find the slope of 3x minus 5y is equal to 1. And we do that by solving this for y. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do these as I write the steps. So we're going to take 3x minus 5y equals 1. Subtract 3x from both sides. Y is equal to -3x plus 1. Divide both sides by -5. That's going to be a positive 3/5 x minus 1/5. And so the slope of this line is 3/5. Okay. This one does require a little bit of an extra step because now I have to figure out what slope I'm going to use to write my equation. So what slope is used for this equation in this problem? Am I going to use 3/5 or am I going to need to find something else? Help me out. Remember, it's perpendicular. You can just, not quite 1/5. What do I want to do? Because remember, my slope is my 3/5. So we are going to use something from this, except we're not going to use my y-intercept. Okay. Aha! We are going to take this, we're going to flip it over, and we are going to make it negative. So we are going to use the reciprocal and change the sign. Exactly. I got several people who are telling me -5/3. Okay. So now for the next step is we're going to use the point we're given, 1, -4, and the slope of -5/3. Remember, that's because it's perpendicular, right? And we're going to go y minus the y value of -4 is equal to the slope of -3 times x minus the x value. Again, I clean up the minus and negative because I think it's just fewer places you make mistakes. Most of you probably are skipping that step anyway and going straight here. That's perfectly fine. I am now going to multiply through by my common denominator of 3, okay? So as I multiply through by this common denominator of 3, I'm going to get 3y plus 12 is equal to -5 times x minus 1. And so I have 3y plus 12, -5x plus 5. Subtracting 12 from both sides, so I have 3y equal to -5x minus 7. And to get it into y is equal to mx plus b form, I have to divide everything by that 3. And so here is my slope-intercept form. Okay. Notice that my -5/3 shows back up. I get rid of that fraction just because the manipulation is easier without the fractions in there, but I end up back with that fraction at the end because I have to have it in that slope-intercept form. Questions? Okay, so here's what we're going to do, all right? Obviously, I can't drag you to the math domain and sit there and watch you work on this, but I am going to highly recommend that you go and do your homework. If you have, you may already finish homework number, which one is this? Number 5. That's amazing if you've already finished it. They're going to take the quiz. But I suggest you go work on homework number 5. I will stick around on the WebEx session for at least 30 minutes or so. So if you've got questions, if you have questions after the 30 minutes are over with, drop me an email, okay? And I can pick back up with it. I do have class at 10 o'clock, so I'll probably be on that WebEx session a little before 10. But I will hang out here, and if you want to ask me questions, jump back in, ask me questions. We can jump on and look at your particular homework questions, whatever you need. But go do your homework or stick around and ask me questions. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to turn off the recording. So, because,